presentar, les quiero presentar a Duke Greenhill. Él es el coordinador, director del programa de diseño gráfico y experiencia visual del Savannah College of Art and Design. Y muy amablemente está aquí hoy con nosotros. So he's going to be talking in English for you today. And so I hope you can enjoy this that we're going to hear today. So Duke, thank you very much again. And these are your students. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Monica. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I hope everyone is doing well. We're just going to dive right in. A lot to talk about, so we'll waste no time. Can everyone see the presentation? Good.
Yes.
So as Monica said, I'm here to speak to you all today about design as a function of connection. How design allows humankind, people, to connect on a level that perhaps we wouldn't be able to otherwise without design, without the body of visual experience that we as humans enjoy. We may not be able to connect in any meaningful way, but because of it, we can. And we're going to look at how that's possible. Again, my name is Duke Greenhill. I'm the chair of graphic design and visual experience and advertising and branding at SCAD. And over the last 20, 25 years or so, I've worked in Hollywood. I've worked in advertising. I've worked in graphic design for some of these cool brands that you see here. And I've written about graphic design or design of all kinds. And its impact on human connection for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and a number of these cool publications that you see here. So it's something that's near and dear to my heart and an important topic, I think. So I'm happy to be here to speak with you all about it. You all may or may not know this lovely woman. Her name is Brene Brown, and she's a researcher out of Houston, Texas. And she researches shame and vulnerability, the way human beings deal with their own vulnerability. But what she's found in her research really is a body of evidence that looks at the way human beings connect. And the only way human beings can connect is to be vulnerable. And the only way that we as designers can design well is also to be vulnerable, right? If we're designing something and we're not putting our whole heart into it and sort of, as we say, wearing our hearts on our sleeves as we create it, then it won't resonate. It won't have that richness of humanity that all design needs to be successful. So Brene Brown, again out of Houston, began researching vulnerability, but found that what she was actually researching was the nature of human connection. And she says, design and connection are inextricably linked. Design is a function of connection. So what her research has found is that design is not just something that by luck or by chance or even by effort allows us to connect. It's something that humankind has generated because it is a connection. Fundamentally, design is about connection, and you can't extract one from the other. The two go together always. And that's what her research has shown, that design and connection are, no matter what, linked together perpetually. But how? And that's what we're here to talk about today, right? How is design this mechanism for human beings to connect in a meaningful way? We know that story is a big part of that, right? And I'm sure in your classes and in your work, you all talk about story. Story is the only thing, perhaps, that is uniquely human. In other words, no other species on the planet, no other creature on the planet tells stories in the way we do. And story has of course, an emotional effect on us, right? We feel something when we hear a good story, but it also has a biochemical effect on the human brain. When the human brain engages with a story, or in this case, engages with design of any kind, it releases chemicals in the brain like dopamine, oxytocin, the chemicals that are associated also with falling in love. So when we hear a story, what our brain is doing is essentially feeling so good that it's as if it were the feeling of falling in love, biochemically speaking. And so human beings are attached to story. We crave it. It's almost as if we're addicted to this idea of story. And for that reason, human beings have been telling story since time began, since there were humans. We go all the way back to the early Mesopotamian cave paintings, which are graphic design, right? And are graphic design telling a story. Humans have done this forever. And again, the reason is it makes us feel good. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when we feel good about ourselves, about the people around us, we're able to connect. And so we know that story is part of this function. But what's interesting, and every time I talk about story and graphic design, a student inevitably says this to me: but what if I'm creating a static print ad? Or what if I'm creating just a static poster? How do I tell a story in an image that's still? And a single frame and all of that? It's impossible to tell a story in that way. And the truth is, of course it isn't. There are plenty of examples of story in a single static image. And to sort of bring it home, there's a great fable about Ernest Hemingway, who was a very famous writer. He lived for the most part, in Key West, Florida. And he was at a bar in Key West, Florida, and someone recognized him as the great writer Ernest Hemingway and said to him, "I'll bet you $100 that you can't write a story in 10 seconds on this cocktail napkin that will make me cry." And Ernest Hemingway took the bet. And he grabbed a cocktail napkin, he grabbed a pen, and he wrote down, and I'm warning you, the story he wrote's a little bit sad, but you'll get my point. And on that cocktail napkin, he wrote in about 3 seconds these 6 words: baby shoes, for sale, never worn. And half the people in the bar started crying. And so Ernest Hemingway got his $100, but more importantly, he made the point that story doesn't have to be a big, elaborate 3-act movie or novel or anything like that. Even the smallest and most static of moments can contain story. And so when we design for connection, we have to always think about, what is the story I'm telling? A lot of that has to do with eye trace. Where does the eye begin in your design? Where does it end? What information does it glean as it makes its way across your design? But story is the essential component of human connection, period. But certainly the central component of human connection in terms of design. And Ernest Hemingway has proven that we can tell moving stories very briefly, very quickly, and with great effect. But when Monica contacted me about speaking to you all, and about the topic, design as connection, I started thinking, we as professional designers have somewhat begun to take for granted that design is about connection. We sort of just say it in passing, and we say it to one another: oh, well, design connects humans, it's important. But because we've been saying it so much, and because perhaps it's so true, it's become almost a cliche. And we've in some ways forgotten what it really means to connect human beings through design. And so when Monica contacted me, I decided that I was going to call up some of the best designers that I've ever worked with. I was going to Zoom with them and record what they thought really it meant, what really they felt it was about design that empowers human beings to connect. And so I created a sort of expert buffet. And I talked to a gentleman named John Howery, who's the chief designer at IBM's IDEO lab, a gentleman named Mike McCulloch, who's my associate chair, but also the chief designer at ESPN, Eric Shoemate, who's one of the leading on the planet nonprofit designers, who's currently working with the government of Colombia and farmers all across South America. Simon Sinek, who's a global speaker, you all may have heard of him, and then Thomas Hull, who's a chief designer for the NFL. And I called them up and asked them, I'm giving a speech about design as connection. We say it all the time, it's kind of lost its meaning. Tell me why your design, why you feel design empowers human beings to connect, and they did. And so I'm going to share what they said to me with you, because I feel like it rediscovers the meaning of connection through design for us as professionals who've been doing it for a while, and hopefully for you all for the first time. We can make some meaning out of this connection that design offers us. So in talking to these designers and thinking about my own career and researching some design theory, I found that there are essentially 4 corners of connection when it comes to design. And so we're going to look at all 4 of those. And these are the chats that I had with those designers I just spoke to you about, and how we arrived at these 4 corners of connection. This is John Howery, and I'll let him speak for himself.
Graphic designers always used to talk about how they were storytellers. And coming from theater, I thought, well, that's nice and everything, but even in theater, we're not really storytellers. We're having conversations with people. They're just in front of us. Yes, we're saying lines that were written by other people or whatever. We're just constantly in conversation with that audience. We're changing what we do and how we perform and everything based on whatever's happening in front of us. So when I became a designer and I started creating experience, when I started creating interactive moments, I realized it's still about that conversation. So I'm not just a storyteller who's having a one-way dialogue, speaking at people, just throwing knowledge around. I'm creating opportunities for exchange. And for me, that's really what design is about. And that's what I try to bring to my students, to not think about some message that they want because they want to say it, but creating intentional conversation, intentional dialogue with the people in front of them. And I think that that Black Lives Matter mural in DC is just the most prime example of how that conversation can change the world and how it should. And it is a simple graphic design feat. It uses simple typography, sans serif, black and black background with white letters on top of it. It uses scale and contrast and all of the things that we use in design, but most important, it uses conversation.
So John brings up the first corner of connection in design, and he's talking about the reason, the purpose, the why behind our design. And the why behind design is always to convey information, right? If it's just for our own pleasure, then it's art. It's not graphic design, right? It's not commercial design or commercial art. So when we engage in commercial design, commercial art, there's intention. There's an intention to exchange information. And already that's connecting us, right? Because as designers, you've sat down to think about a target audience, to think about how they're going to translate your design, what they need to know in order to get done whatever the goal of that design is. And so already you're connecting to the people for whom you're designing. And when they see your design, already they're connecting with you. And so it's about an intentional exchange of information, no matter what the design and no matter what the goal of it. When you sit down to create it, you are intentionally conveying information one way. And in their translation, in the audience's translation of your design, they are intentionally conveying information back to you. And that is connection. And John Howery talks about in his little bit there, the Black Lives Matter murals that went up in Washington, D.C., as being a great example of how simple design can be and yet be so connective. And when we look at some of these murals, they are simple and they are beautiful, and they immediately, at least in the States, with some of the social unrest that we're dealing with, immediately conjure an emotion, immediately conjure a connection. And in fact, some of these murals in Washington, D.C. have been so impactful on the residents of Washington, D.C., that huge conversations, dialogue has come of them, and people are meeting around them to discuss the race problems in America, and to come together and try to correct them in their own small communities. The idea being that if every small community corrects the problem, then the problem at large becomes corrected. And so design is about dialogue, no matter what, no matter the goal, no matter the design. At the end of the day, dialogue is essential to our understanding of one another, said Dr. Martin Luther King. And that's true. How can we know one another? How can we connect with one another if we haven't talked, if we haven't communicated, if we haven't exchanged ideas intentionally with one another? And again, design, no matter the goal, no matter what it is, must include this intentional conveyance of information from maker to receiver. And so connection is inherent in that. So dialogue is the first corner of connection when it comes to design. This exchange of ideas that happens inevitably between the maker and the audience. This is Mike McCulloch, again, the chief designer at ESPN, and let's hear what he has to say about design and connection.
Hi, my name is Michael McCulloch. I'm the Associate Chair of Graphic Design at SCAD. I just wanted to touch on one important topic, and that's the intervention of design when it comes to artificial intelligence and robotics. And I think as we've learned the last 6 months that this trajectory has moved much quicker than anyone anticipated. And so as things move forward, whether it be through messaging systems, whether it be points of delivery or automated cars, we need to consider how our designs work as positive interventions in making these experiences less disorienting and creating that connection so we have more of a agency as humans and feel less like we're stepping away from these actions. So my point that I'm trying to leave you with is this, is the ethical considerations should be as important as the technological advances. And we as designers are the true gatekeepers to that fine line. So thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate your time. Have a good afternoon.
So what Mike's talking about, and he's a little overly intellectual. Sometimes he's talking and I'm not even sure what the words coming out of his mouth mean. But in this case, what he's talking about is the mandate of design, right? It is the way that we move people. Words can move people, and image can move people. And the two together can move people even more powerfully. But our two weapons, the two things in our arsenal that allow us to create a movement, to get people together to achieve something, are image and word. And what Mike is saying is that innate within design is this protective sort of quality, that because design is innately human, it innately protects humans, or should protect humans anyway. I don't know if any of you have seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma, on Netflix, but it talks about how design is being used for bad, for evil almost. And it looks at social media and the way that we design social media from an experience design, a UI sort of perspective, and discovers that the reason that we are all sort of always on our phone and so addicted to social media is that it's been designed to addict us. The swiping, the pulling down and waiting for something at the top of the feed to reload, FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. All of this design was specifically created to keep us on the screen. And it creates an echo chamber, right? The algorithms that the designers use to create social media serve us information that's stuff we already believe. It doesn't ever serve us information that's contrary to our beliefs. So diversity of ideas gets lost. It increases polarization because we're not hearing other ideas. And it diminishes our own self-worth because we're constantly seeking the validation from the algorithm, from the people who we think we know, our friends on social media, but to whom we really don't have, some of them we might, but most of them we don't really have a meaningful physical, emotional connection. And so what Mike is saying is that design at its best saves us from ourselves. And we can design for greater self-worth, greater connection, less echo chamber, more diversity, or we can design for the opposite. And when we design for the good, then we can change the world. And when we change the world, we're connected, right? It takes a movement, it takes passion and many, many people to make change in the world. And that is connection. I want to show you all something that a bunch of sound designers did. And I know that we're mostly image and graphic designers here, but I like to look at other forms of design that are near to graphic design to sort of extrapolate meaning. If we only look at what we do, then our vision is a little limited. But this is something that a bunch of sound designers did to recreate the speech that John F. Kennedy would have made the afternoon he was shot had he not been shot. So JFK was in Dallas. He was headed to Fort Worth to make another speech. And he was shot on his way to Fort Worth to make that speech and never got to make it. And so these sound designers went and took all of the speeches that he ever made and put them together with artificial intelligence and machine learning to recreate the speech as if he would have made it. But I'll let you see it for yourself.
On the 22nd of November, 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated as his motorcade made its way to the Dallas Trade Mart.
There has been an attempt on the life of President Kennedy. It is true.
What if technology had advanced so much so as to allow JFK, on the centenary of his birth, to finally deliver the hugely important trademark speech? As part of the Times Find Your Voice campaign, we had to review 831 JFK speeches and interviews and create a database of 116,777 phonetic sound units, split into 233,554 half phones. To blend small speech units together, it helps to have very consistent data. For JFK, this was a major challenge. It was almost as if each recording was in a different environment and of a different quality, so combinations of sounds were selected and smoothed together by months of painstaking sound engineering, allowing us to finally hear the trademark speech delivered in JFK's own voice.
In a world of complex and continuing problems, in a world full of frustrations and irritations, America's leadership must be guided by the lights of learning and reason, or else those who confuse rhetoric with reality and the plausible with the possible will gain the popular ascendance with their seemingly swift and simple solutions to every world problem.
We tracked down people who were waiting at the Trade Mart that day and played it to them.
We ask, therefore, that we
It gave me chills just to hear his voice again. Oh, gosh.
Data usually sharpens a story, but for JFK, it made it possible to actually tell the story and allowed over 1 billion people to finally hear JFK unsilenced. Since the launch of JFK Unsilenced, this audio technique has been adopted.
So here's, and albeit it's sound design, but still the same sort of practice, right? Their tiny little moments, their little quips are our pixels, and they have to push them around and smooth them out and make them fit together in the right way, the same way we do. But here is a form of design married with a new kind of technology that takes a human being who was just impossibly closely connected to many, many Americans at the time, and was killed, brings him back to life in a way, and allows the Americans who loved him so to reconnect with him and to reconnect with his message, and to reconnect with the philosophy that sort of guided him. And so design, when used for good, can do that, can in certain ways bring people back to life, can bring us back to life, right? Reinvigorate passion in us and connect us to those who share that passion. Jaron Lanier, who is a design and technology philosopher, said that literally redesigning culture is the only thing that can save us from ourselves. And when we look at the way that social media platforms and others have designed to take advantage of our human weaknesses, we also must look at design that takes advantage of our human strengths, of what's good about human beings. And there's plenty of good about human beings. Graphic design, sound design, design of all kinds is the writer of culture, the creator of culture. The visual language of the time, everything we see around us is evolving constantly. And our culture is in large part determined by the design that's out there in the market. And so we have to think about what we're using it for. And when we're using it for good, we connect on an impossible level, even with people who are dead, and the world becomes better. So the second corner of connection as it applies to design is this notion that design defines culture. And if we are all living in, whether it's our neighborhood's culture, our city's culture, our country's culture, or our global culture, design is defining it, and we're all living within it. And by virtue of us all sharing that same cultural experience, whether it's your neighbors or those that live in your city with you, by virtue of us all sharing that experience, we are connected. So here's Eric Shoemate, who has been working in South America primarily with the government of Colombia to empower South American farmers toward independence.
Caring, kindness, and compassion, empathy puts humans at the center of design. This is the design for the people. This design carries with it the power to live and breathe on its own, and it has this circular existence. This human-centered design outlives any thing or artifact that we create. It crushes planned obsolescence and dissolves station of place. The result of the empathetic approach is genuine and can be trusted. Why? Because it's designed together. It's designed to be inclusive. It's designed with ownership throughout the process. The results can be life-changing in ways that cannot be measured in profits. We went into the fields of South America. We talked with the farmers in this particular project. We farmed with these farmers. We worked in the community with these guys. We spent time. And the farmers actually felt like they were stakeholders in the design process. This project could never have succeeded if it had not been designed together. And there's nothing more empowering than to have the people that you're designing for believe it's their design too.
So what he's saying is that by definition, design requires a connection in the first place, right? You all have heard the old adage, perhaps, if a tree falls in the woods, does anyone hear it? Well, if you design something and no one sees it, then is it really design, or is it just something for you? Design is, by definition, something that goes out into market and engages people. Usually, we want it to engage as many people as possible. And so, in a way, the people who engage with our design are co-creators with us. They apply the meaning, they extract the information, they are stakeholders in the meaning of the designs that we create. And Eric talks about this. He said spending time with his audience so that he could design effectively meant meeting them face to face, shaking hands, giving hugs, collaborating and co-creating with them, allowing them to translate his design in whatever way they needed, and generating empathy which is the foundation of connection and the foundation of design. So again, by definition, connection cannot exist without empathy, and design cannot exist without empathy. And so the two then therefore are inextricably connected. Frank Chimero, who's a designer, says that people ignore design that ignores people. And so if we are not conscious of the fact that our audience is our co-creator, not just an audience, not just a translator, but the people who are responsible for creating the meaning from our design, if we always remember that, then we have human-centered design and we have innate connection because we are making it together. Whether we see them or not, whether we ever meet them face to face or not, we're still making the meaning with them. And that's connection. I want to show you another example of design, this time product design, that essentially saved millions of lives in India. And I'll let it speak for itself.
Kids love to use their hands. Kids explore the world with their hands. In India, they use their hands for one more thing: eating food. Not washing their hands with soap is one of the main causes for illnesses and dropouts. So we gave shape to a simple idea. We infused chalk sticks with soap. Introducing Savlon Healthy Hands Chalk Sticks. These work just like regular chalk sticks. But at lunch break, they did more than just writing. The chalk powder turned into soap on its own. Through such initiatives, Savlon Swasth India is reaching out to schools across the country. Kids' health will now be in good hands, their own.
So here are millions of children in India are getting sick every year from not washing their hands, something as simple as not washing their hands. And as a result, have to leave school and are unable to ever return to receive their education. And in many cases, some of the children die from their illness. And so here comes a set of designers, graphic designers, product designers, systems designers, who come into India. They worked with an ad agency called Ogilvy Mumbai, come into India and say, design can fix this problem. Let us try to save these children. And there's connection already, right? When we set about to design something as professional designers, again, not as studio artists, but professional designers, we set about to solve a problem from the get-go. And in setting about to solving a problem, there's already connection. We're already connecting to the group that suffers from that problem or needs relief from that problem or whatever the case may be. So design solves a problem, and that's connection. But when you actually go into a country like these designers did, take chalk, infuse it with something as simple as soap so that as these kids are drawing, they're also washing their hands. that's making the world a better place. That's changing millions of lives. And that is connection, right? Just simply solving a problem for someone. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to save their lives. It doesn't have to be like the video you just saw. Simply seeking to solve a problem for anyone, which is what design does, is empathy, is connection, and requires our connection to them, to their problem, and their connection to us, to our solution. But how beautiful that even something so simple as a little bit of soap and a piece of chalk can save millions and millions of lives, which is obviously connection. I'll let Eric finish out his bit.
So to bring this all back around, when we get tossed into design, can we reorder our priorities? And if nothing else, just consider this. Can we shift the process flow to a more organic one, a more human one that should consider the social, cultural, and ecological impacts of what we're creating? Bring the person, the people, the humans to the center of the process, making them more equal than the thing that we're designing.
And he's right? We talk now in design about human-centered design. And many designers I know, top-rate designers, have stopped using the word user. They don't talk about user interface. They don't talk about the user of design anymore. They talk about the human, the person, because user is depersonalizing. It removes the humanity from the situation. And we are learning more and more that the truly great pieces of design, the truly great works, are those that have the human being at the center. Not the user, but the human being, the empathy, the soul, the meaning at the very center of the design, which is by definition connection. So the third corner is that design is innately human, right? Humans make it, humans translate it, humans share it. We all engage with it with the same thing and extrapolate different meaning. So it's innately human. We can't separate humanity from good design. And for that reason, it's collaborative. Again, you may be the maker, but someone is seeing it and deriving their own meaning from whatever you've made. And so whether we like it or not, it's always a collaborative process with our audience. Steph Geisbuehler, who teaches at SCAD some and was the designer of the NBC Peacock logo, the Time Warner logo. I mean, many of the huge logos for Fortune 100 companies that you see were designed by him. And he says designers can never forget that by definition, they are also leaders. And this is true, right? The obvious sort of way is wayfinding, right? You're guiding people to something when you're creating wayfinding or environmental graphics. But we're leaders because, as we talked about before, we write, we create contemporary culture. And so we have to remember that in that way, we are cultural leaders. And so to that end of being a leader, I'll let Simon Sinek say a little bit about empathy.
So I thought I would do something a little different today. You know, when you're speaking to tens of thousands of people and you have the opportunity to share a message, of course, most rational people would say, let's go with something I've talked about lots of times and I'm really good at, but I'm not normal, so I'm going to do something completely new, and I hope this works out. There are two things that I think that great leaders need to have: empathy and perspective. And I think these things are very often forgotten. Leaders are so often so concerned about their status or their position in an organization, they actually forget their real job. And the real job of a leader is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in our charge.
So if designers are by definition leaders, and they are, again, we lead culture, then it is our responsibility not to design to our audience, but to design for our audience. Not to tell them something, but to show them something, right? And that in and of itself is a form of connection. That level of understanding, I'm going to take care of you in a way, requires empathy, which is fundamental to connection. And you can see this sort of chart, how we evolve from sympathy to empathy to compassion. But as I talked about before, empathy is the fundamental the absolute cornerstone of connection between humans, and it's the absolute cornerstone of design. And so the two share the same structure, the same architecture, the same foundation, and are therefore, again, inextricably connected. What I have always said, I'm quoting myself here, is that good design connects the maker and the human to the point that one feels with the other. We don't want to feel for our audience. We don't want our audience to feel for us, but we want to feel the meaning of that design together. And together is connection. So the fourth sort of corner of connection as it applies to design is this notion of empathy and perspective. And if we always sit down with empathy at the center of our work, then it's going to be good, right? If we can truly understand our audience, what they're going through, and feel with them instead of for them, then we are connected and our design will be better than it would be otherwise. There's my favorite book in the world, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. And there's a quote that says, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside of his skin and walk around it. And that's what makes a great designer. Sure, you need to be able to push the pixels. You need to be able to keep your layers organized. You need to be able to understand shape and color and form and context, contrast, all of that stuff. Those tools that we talk about as designers. But fundamentally, your task is to be able to step into the skin of your audience and walk around for a while and understand them and feel with them. So if you are a good designer, you are by definition connected to your audience because you're feeling with them. And you remember the technology that the designers used to create the new JFK video. I always like to close with a reminder that design at its best makes us better. And design at its best makes the world a better place. The same technology that they used to resurrect JFK, they used for something else. And I'll show you that now.
Ice bucket, bring it on.
Creating awareness and being an advocate is what I wanted to do. Every August until a cure.
One of the hardest things about ALS is losing the ability to speak. I don't want to sound like a computer. I want to sound like me.
To give Pat his voice back, we had to look beyond existing technology, which limits patients to pre-recorded phrases or words mechanically stitched together.
This is my voice, which I spent an hour a day, 4 months recording.
With less than 2 hours of Ice Bucket interviews, we used a custom deep learning algorithm to analyze the unique DNA of Pat's voice, completely recreating it and integrating it with his eye tracking device. For the first time in over a year, Pat could speak freely and naturally in his own voice.
Time to say goodbye to this computerized voice.
It's a strange feeling saying your first words a second time. It's like you don't even realize how powerful, how personal, and just how unique your voice really is until it's taken from you. Guess who's back, bitches?
I mean, that is just highly emotional stuff. It's absolutely life-changing. They have him back, to hear his voice again. That is just a marvel.
This new technology will bring new hope to thousands of sufferers, both here and around the world.
Find out more by going to the website projectrevoice.org.
Thanks to Project Revoice, I can finally speak freely in my own voice again. This will change how people live with ALS forever.
So here are web designers, user interface designers, experience designers, graphic designers, sound designers, all coming together with this new technology to successfully, literally give thousands of people back their voice. I mean, wrap your head around that. The power at our fingertips as designers to give people back their voice and to make the world a better place. When we are at our best, we are, again, solving a problem. And in order to do that, we are connected to the people who share the problem. We're empathetic with them. And connection, again, it's not just something that's a quality of design. It is design. Design is about connection. And I'm going to let Thomas Hull finish it out for us. He sort of sums it up beautifully.
So when I think of the role of design in my life or in my career, I think of impact. I always like to think of impact in terms of the impact the work that I did had on my clients, the impact that it had on the people around me that I worked with and that I collaborated with. And I think of the impact that it had on those who were at the receiving end of those messages, of those communications, the way it shaped their perceptions or encouraged them to action or led them to change a position. But when I think about the larger role of design, of a bigger impact, I think of our ancestors making marks in caves and leaving something behind that said, I was here. This is what I saw. This is what surrounded me. And I think from that time till now, we're still leaving marks in a way to announce or leave behind some legacy that we were here, that what we did and what we think and the way that we approach the world mattered. I think design has the ability to transcend time and move across borders and rise above cultures and across peoples. And I think when at its best, design has a way to transcend our species and leave a mark to say, we're here.
So at its best, not only does design connect us to one another in the here and now, because as makers, we have to understand the problem we're solving. We have to understand and empathize with the people we're working with, but it connects us across time. At the beginning, I talked about the cave paintings of Mesopotamia that most designers have looked at as a historical reference for design. And when you think that here are graphic designers essentially who lived tens of thousands of years ago, and yet I'm looking at their work and I'm seeing their style and I'm understanding part of what the world must have been like for them and what was meaningful to them then, 10,000 years before me, through a simple cave painting. I am connected to the maker who's 10,000 years older than I am. And that just blows my mind. So again, through empathy, which is the fundamental building block of design, and the fundamental building block of connection, the two are inextricably connected and connect us across not only borders and not only cultures, but time as well, which is just amazing. And motivates me anyway every day to empathize with my audience and be the best designer I can be. And on a great day, occasionally we even get to make our worlds a little bit better place through that connection, which is a wonderful, wonderful gift. So thank you all for listening. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about design and connection. We have a few minutes, I think, right, Monica? If anyone has a question.
Yes, thank you, Duke. It was really encouraging what you just talked us about. And yeah, we have a few minutes for our students to ask you some questions. If anybody would like to write their questions, please. While our students are writing, I would like to ask you something. Sure. Considering the times and situation we are living now, we've been locked up since March. We haven't seen our students face to face. I mean, just through these monitors. But what would you think would be the stories relevant to tell this time and the time to come?
I think the relevant story here is that we, and by we I mean human beings, particularly artists, particularly designers, we find a way. And there's an adage, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Mm-hmm. Difficult times inspire creativity in us. In fact, there's a phenomenon called creative constraint, which talks about the more difficult a situation, the more difficult a client brief, the more difficult a problem to solve, the greater our creativity will be in the solving of it. And so despite the fact that and believe me, I'm with you, Monica, I'm losing my mind sitting here in my house and barely seeing anybody.
Yeah.
And this isn't the same as being in a room with somebody, but it's not worse. It's just different.
Yeah.
And it's tough because it's different. And so I think the story that's worth focusing on anyway is how we as humans are rising above this challenge to find ways to teach one another. My nephews live 1,000 miles away. They're 6 years old. They're the light of my life. And I get to see them, nonetheless. Yeah. We're finding ways to connect with our families who are not in the same geographical space. And so I think the story worth telling, there's many we could tell, but the one worth telling is one of triumph. Here is this problem that's facing us, and designers are fixing it. The communications about washing your hands, wear your mask, do this, do that, those are designers, right? Those are, that's what we do. And so in difficulty, in challenge lies opportunity. And the story we should be telling is, or writing right now, creating, is what is our opportunity here? What can we do to let this necessity be the mother of some invention for us, some innovation for us, something new for us? And again, it's just different. It's not worse, but it's different, and human beings struggle with different. But we'll get there, and this can't go on forever, I hope.
I hope. Paulina, I think there's a question from Daniela Gonzalez.
Daniela Gonzalez. No, I think it's from Jan Villalobos.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Jan Villalobos says a comment, and it says like this. I think it's something beautiful to return a voice to a human being, but I think in the future it can turn into something wrong, like in the social media, they didn't think enough the bad consequences.
Yes, I totally agree with you. It's the same as, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but you're right, anything, a human being, technology that gives voices back, technology that washes children's hands, anything can be used for good or bad, right? And it is our responsibility as makers to set out to create for the good. You're right too, Jan. The people who created social media didn't create it knowing the problems that it was going to cause, or even wanting the problems that it causes. They made it trying to connect people, and it did at first, right? When you guys are too young to remember Friendster, but Friendster was the first thing before Facebook, and I connected with people I hadn't seen in decades, and it was wonderful. But it's about context, and we all, as designers, think about context when we design. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, Facebook was connecting people in that context. Today, it's disconnecting people in the new context. And so something that works then isn't always the tool that we need now. But we have to be careful. And you're right, design, there could be consequences for that technology, and design is going to be the thing that prevents those dangers, if anything. That's great.
It's a huge responsibility, I think.
Yes, no doubt.
So, yeah. And well, here Daniela Gonzalez says, I think there are a lot of opportunity areas in society we as designers can contribute. After your presentation, I'm truly motivated. How do you recommend us to start looking for solutions to this problem? And what do you think should be our first step?
If you want to contribute as a designer with, to making the world a better place, for lack of a better phrase. I always say the best place to start is in your backyard. Don't think about what can I do, what can I design that's gonna, in a moment, change the world. The way that we change the world, Gandhi said this, be the change that you want to see in the world, right? You just be that change and hope that people follow. So if you want to contribute, make a difference in your own backyard. Start with your neighborhood, start with your family, start with the tiny little, your neighborhood is a great place. And look at what is challenging or problematic for the people of that neighborhood and think of a solution. If we all took care of our own little worlds, then the world would be better, right? If all of our own little worlds we set out to make better, then the big world would be better too. So you need not look globally, worldwide, countrywide to solve a problem. You can do that in your own backyard, in your own neighborhood. And that's where I'd start.
Perfect. Yeah, and then Claudia says, what do you think? Claudia is a teacher. So she asks, what do you think is missing in the education of young designers, like philosophy, ethics, psychology, anthropology? What subjects do you think our schools should be focusing on aside from developing technical skills? Amazing talk. Thank you.
Thank you. I think most of the schools that I've encountered, and from the little bit of research I've done about your own, yours included, get the job done. You have to learn the technical skills. The technology we use changes, right? We may not be using Adobe Illustrator 10, 15 years from now. We may be using something else. But fundamentally, the technique, the theory, you have to have. If there's anything that schools aren't teaching, I worry that they aren't teaching humanity. They aren't teaching psychology and philosophy, so that we can really understand one another's stories and engage empathetically that way. I had a great designer that worked for me for a while told me once that he thought what made him a good designer was that he read every book he could get his hands on. He watched every movie he could see. He went to every museum he passed, right? He consumed visual culture. And if we limit ourselves, if we limit our sort of repertoire of reference to only graphic design or experience design or interface design, then we're limiting ourselves, because everything is design, right? The layout of a city, the great images of Manhattan, of New York City from the sky, and you see the layout of the streets, which is, designed via grid, the same as we lay out a magazine. Design is everywhere, and we have to look at everything as design and take reference points from living and sort of breathe it to make ourselves truly better. So I wish schools taught more. I wish design schools taught more literature, more film, more philosophy, but there's just not enough time. We've got to teach you all the technique and the technical skills.
Yeah, you're right.
So thank you all again. I appreciate it. It's been wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really, it has been really inspiring. I was just thinking about what we've been hearing since yesterday and what we've been talking during class time with our students, and it really resonates with us. So I really thank you for all your concepts. I would like to ask all our participants to put on their video camera so we can take a picture. You can see perhaps their faces.
Yes.
We have to run, but yeah, we can do that. I'm really glad that our students are here to hear you. It's really exciting. We have 77 people with us.
All right.
This morning. Yeah, really, I'm really happy. I hope they can take in your words and apply them into their daily projects and see what they can do better. That's our hope. I really thank you all for being here. And also, I would like to present you. It's an acknowledgement of your being here with us. If I can find it, yeah, it's right here. We're going to be sending it to you in a short while. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
It's an acknowledgement and a thank you note for being here with us. And I'm hopeful that in a while, perhaps we can work together, your students, our students, we can find a project to work together to connect, and
yeah.
see what we can do together. We have a lot of questions from our students. I'm going to be sending you via mail so you can hear their voices through their questions.
Wonderful.
And hopefully we can meet sometime. This has to pass, and we're going to be able to move, and perhaps we can go and visit your school with a group of students. That would be great.
Oh, we would love that. We would love that.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much for everybody to be here, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all. Be well.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye. Gracias a todos por estar aquí. Pásenla bien. Aprendan mucho.
Buenísima plática. Felicidades.
Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a todos. Gracias, Melissa.
Gracias.
Gracias, Pau.
Gracias.
Estén muy bien. Nos vemos en la tarde.
Sí.
Bye.
Bye.
Gracias, bye.
Oye, Moni.
Bye. Sí.
Perdón, rápido una pregunta. Todo lo que anotamos y así, bueno, los IDs y todo, ¿te lo mandamos?